Warning: Disillusioned podcast covers distressing themes such as coercive control, domestic violence, sexual assault, suicide, abuse, and human trafficking. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Disillusion Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Shearwood, and today we have a very special episode. Ryan Anthony Hernandez, who is the host of Truth That Heals podcast. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going great. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to actually hear your story because I don't really know much about your background. So do you want to get into like what cult you're from?
Yeah, well, sure. Well, I grew up, was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and it was actually not toxic. It was actually very friendly and very open to education, and very normal, I would say. And I know a lot of people who have Christian upbringings are very like super extreme. No, I think it was pretty relaxed, pretty chill. But I always had the heart to do something good with my hands, like to go and feed the poor or to work and help the elderly. I always had that desire growing up. And there was a community that claimed to be totally Catholic and totally Christian, and they're going to help people. And I was inspired by that. And they were saying that, yeah, we want to give you an education. So, okay, so the way this group presented itself was very Christian, very wholesome. But once a person joins, they leave their family. And my parents were like, "What the hell are you doing? Like you're so young. You're only 17. You got to finish high school. You got to go to college." And that's how I was brought up. Getting the idea of getting your education, having a foundation for the rest of your life. But the more I got involved with this group, the more I thought, or the more they told me, God is calling you. You got to join us. You have to be a part of this group, because if you don't join now, you're saying no to God. And I was like, no, am I going to say no to God? So it put on this pressure. And also they promised I would be getting an education, probably going to Rome, studying philosophy, studying languages. So it's the way it's presented, like a perfect gift. You're going to go travel, you can do all these things. But once you join, once you say your yes to them, you're stuck. It's like a prison. And that's what it was. So I was in this group. I joined in 2004 and I came out in 2015. So I entered at the age of 17 and I came out when I was 28 years old, and I was just really lost when I came out. So that's just a bit of a kind of filling you into a bit about my.
Okay, a couple questions. So did they offer to like pay for your college education or something, or how did they offer you an education?
No, I mean, it was just like, hey, you're going to get an education.
Oh, they're going to educate you.
It's like, okay, well, all right, I'm going to get a. But the crazy thing was that I already had a plan back home. I'm from Los Angeles, and my plan was, finish my high school, go to actually my big dream was to go to USC, and from there, live my life, get a wife, or focus on my career and live my life. And while living my life, even as a kid, it's like this is what I had planned out. Whatever I'm gonna be, I just want to be a good person.
Yeah.
That's what cults like to target, people who have good hearts or people who have a desire to see change or to see some growth. And that's how I was. And I was, I thought I was going to get an education, but it was more like brainwashing, or I don't know, indoctrination, or I don't know, programming.
So things took a turn at some point in the group for you?
Well, at first it was, before even entering, it was the presentation of getting an education and doing good things for the rest of my life. And that's how they promised my parents, because they were obviously like, what the hell are you doing? And they promised, hey, we're a good Catholic community, blah, blah, blah. We're doing everything right. We're safe. We're a safe place. With me, it was more like, if you don't join, if you don't follow God, God is going to curse you. God is going to not only curse you, he's going to curse the rest of your family. You're going to be a misfit for the rest of your life because God is calling you now. So they put on this pressure that, golly, I got to join now. I got to leave now. I know I have an education that I got to work on, but if God is calling me now and the end of the world is going to come, because they also bring in this fear of the end of the world and World War III and all of these other negative things, it puts on a pressure, especially on a teenager. I was only 16 actually when they started bombarding me.
Wow.
That's when I said, all right, I'm going to join. And initially, I thought that this was going to be a place of love and kindness, is the way they were kind of working it up to be. But then when I got there, yes, this is the tricky part. Yes, there are a lot of good people there, like in Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons. I bet there are some amazing people who aren't pricks. But the leadership and like those who they put to be in charge of other members, they put the biggest pricks. I can say worse words, but I think that's the
you can say whatever you want.
All right, thanks. So they put these very negative, very authoritative people, and the idea is they're trying to break you down. And when I saw that, my first thought was, what the hell is this? This is supposed to be a place of God's love. It's supposed to be a place where, I mean, I grew up Catholic, I grew up Christian. This isn't what I was raised with. But then they would insert religion, insert biblical text or something, and twist it. They would twist something it's totally not what I think Christianity is supposed to be. Because they would say stuff like, well, Jesus suffered, so you should suffer too, and you should shut the hell up.
Wow.
So although I did see the wrong, I did see like the abuse of power, and I saw those things. When they inserted the Bible or theology and they would twist it, it would make me think, yeah, Jesus did suffer. I should just shut up and suffer in silence. So that stayed with me for a while, and then the abuses just started mounting and mounting. It wasn't just towards me; it was just to other members, to the females, to the males. Just so much bullshit that I saw happening, which I think I truly believe has no place in any Christian group, any Catholic group, any group at all. It has no place, and it's totally not in line with the gospel, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, that's and that seems quite common. I hear a lot of stories of evangelical cults that do similar things where you have to suffer because Christ suffered. Like, you suffer, that's how you get to heaven. You don't get luxuries, you don't get money, you don't get the good things in life because that's not our purpose here, right? So at what point did they start kind of shifting those teachings on you? How many years in were you when they started making it more about suffering and doom and gloom and things like that?
Pretty much immediately, okay. Because already the superiors who I had were very, pounding down on, this is the rule, this is the law, there's only the right way and every other way is the wrong way. It's either our way or the highway. So they're already pounding that down. But you mentioned something about like the luxuries. We have to suffer. We shouldn't be having luxuries. There were so many things. I mean, we can be here for days. But there were so many things that I saw, but I excused them. I would give an excuse for them. For example, they would show pictures of us because, I mean, I was recruited in LA and then I was transferred to the Philippines. And
wow.
They would take pictures of us, and we're living like in freaking, poverty and very poor conditions. But I know that they would be sharing these pictures with our parents, our families, or with benefactors back in the States or in Australia. They'd be showing these pictures. Look at these members that we have. They are, we have poor conditions. Please send your money. But shoot, like, where did that money go? Because there were many times when we didn't really eat. The food at times it's deplorable. It was just deplorable conditions. And if you complain, it's considered being ungrateful. But then it's like, well, where the hell is the money going? It's like, that's none of your business. So these are
they
things.
were scamming. They were literally scamming your families.
Yeah, absolutely. And our parents are, well, I remember when I finally left 11 years later, my mother told me, hey, I saw a picture of you. You're, or of you and the other members in it's like a poor place, and it looks like there's construction happening. Can you tell me what happened to the facility? Did they finish constructing it? I said, no. My mom was like, well, where did the money go? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. That's a good question. And it took many years for me to acknowledge that, yeah, they were scamming. And it kind of hurts because you trust these people and not just me, but also my parents, because they weren't involved in the cult. I mean, they didn't even want me to join, but they wanted to, of course, provide food and shelter. So when they saw that I wasn't getting the basic needs, it does hurt. It's a betrayal.
Right. Yeah. And they want to support you, like your parents obviously love you and care about you. And so they traveled around the world. Were they doing mission trips and like preaching in the Philippines?
Well,
or did they have a church?
Well, the founder is a Filipino. So in Catholicism, you have it's called a diocese. There's a different diocese in each location, and each diocese has a bishop. Now, the bishop is connected to the Pope. It's a long story. I don't want to make it too deep. But what I observed was that every time this founder was in a certain diocese, he would shake things up and he would do his bizarre stuff. And the bishop would, of course, kick him out. So that if he was in LA, he gets kicked out. Then he goes to another place, says, hey, I'm good, I'm clean, and then shake things up. So then we would travel, but I think it was more like hiding. We're always having this paranoia that we were being persecuted. But the truth is, now that I really think about it, they were just hiding the reality that they weren't doing things the proper way. And so for me, that's why I can't call that group a Catholic group, because of all the scamming and all the fraud that was in.
Right. And that is something that is really important to point out. A lot of cults do start as a church. It's very easy for a cult leader or an aspiring cult leader to just buy or, lease a building and start their own church. And of course, people just go around looking for churches, right? And you stumble upon different churches and you have no idea that is actually a cult, but they have Christianity so embedded in their teachings. It's so confusing, like, to differentiate between whether this is actually that religion or a cult, and it's something that, I know there's a lot of churches like that in Texas, that are like cults. That'll be like mega churches, evangelical churches. But then if you really do your research, you'll find a lot of bad stuff's actually going on. And so it is important to be careful when you're looking for churches.
And it is confusing, like you said. That's the perfect word. It brings a lot of confusion because you see that there's it's rooted in Christianity, but once you're in it and you can't leave, because if I were to leave, then I would have this guilt and shame that I abandoned God. It really brings confusion, and that's not what religion is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a place where it brings in this guilt and hatred to yourself. So I hated myself, and I think that's what came from this cult mentality, that if you aren't perfect like the leader, you have to be like the leader. If not, then you're not truly holy, and things like that.
Right, like the leader is the only one that's truly guaranteed to go to heaven, and everyone else has to really suffer and work hard to even have like a chance, right? Like it just keeps you on your toes. So that is wild. So do they have a name?
Well, that's hard because, well, I stick with the founder. The name of the founder is Father Bain. It's his nickname. His real name is Father, I don't even want to call him Father, but Father Edgardo Arellano. And I kind of hesitate to bring a name because knowing him, what I've seen is that every time he gets like investigated or his group gets investigated, he'll leave the group and he'll make another one and start a new with a new name. So when I was in there, it was called the Alliance of the Holy Family International. But who knows? It could have changed. It could be something else. So that's why I have a hard time kind of pinpointing, because during my time there, for example, let's say I'm back in the Diocese of LA, and in LA the group is banned, or at least at the time I was there, the group was banned. So the founder would say, okay, Alliance of the Holy Family is banned, so let's change our name. It's the same group, but we just change our name, or like we would have habits or like uniforms. Okay, let's change our uniforms. Now today we're going to pretend that we're students. So it kind of felt like I'm being like an FBI agent, like undercover, and it would really bring in this notion of everyone out there is wrong. All of these investigations or people trying to what's the word, um, scrutinize our group, it's because they're an enemy and because they're with Satan, stuff like that. For me, like at the time, I was like, I bought into it, but
Right.
deep inside, I knew it was bullshit.
Right. And they're clearly scammers, and it sounds like they have the patterns. I've seen documentaries. One documentary, I cannot remember the name of it right now, but it was about a con artist. And it sounds so much like what you're describing, like moving around. Today we're this, tomorrow we're that, and we have to like hide, and we got to leave and go across the country, and like just keeping your members on your toes. They're pretty much a cult, but it, is more of a con artist who's stealing money from their families. So it's just like the same exact patterns. So that is absolutely wild. And so for 10 years, 10 years, right? You were in the group, or 11?
11.
10, 11 years?
11.
Okay. So what was your final straw?
Well, it was actually it was a few years worth of abuse, manipulation, and I really had the desire to be a good person and to be close to Christ, to carry my cross, all that, theology stuff. And I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with people wanting to make sacrifices in life. But I just had enough. And it was just a lot of things. Like, for example, my grandma died and they lied to my family. They said that I didn't want to go to the funeral.
Wow.
They lied to me. They said that my family didn't want me at the funeral. And so when I came back home, I mean, that's just one thing. Another thing was that I was able to connect with people, talk.
Mhm.
I was like, I'm not a politician, but I was like a politician, shaking hands, because even if the person wasn't Catholic, I always had that idea of, I don't care, like I'll be cool with anybody. And I felt that many of them didn't like that. And so I would always get in trouble for like, for example, Ryan, they would make an announcement. Ryan was seen talking to a bunch of people today. He didn't have permission. So today he's going to be on silence for 3 days and fasting for 1 week, or things like that. And it would also shift to solitary confinement. That was for like 9 months. And then there were beatings. So
Wow.
I did take it because the idea that many of the other like good members were like, hey, like, just keep praying and hopefully God will help you through this. And I see they're good members because I feel like they didn't really have that maliciousness. They don't have the vocabulary. They didn't have the skills to really help me out. They were trying their best to just, give me some motivation. But all these things, plus I didn't graduate high school. Hey, I mean,
You didn't, you were still in high school, so
yeah,
okay.
I was still in high school. So it's like,
So you didn't
man,
even graduate when you were probably right there
I
at
was
the end of
right
high school.
there. So, and, they were telling me, just offer it up to God. This is your sweet sacrifice. And it's like, well, damn. Because then they're telling me, hey, get ready because you might have to study philosophy. So I did study philosophy,
That's awesome.
but for 3 years. But I study philosophy like I'm not there. It's like I don't really exist because it's in the Philippines and I don't have a student visa, or I don't have, no, not just a student visa, but I also don't have a high school diploma. So all these things, I did all this education thinking, yeah, I'm going to be legit a philosopher, but then it's like, well, you're not really enrolled. So it's like, well, damn, it's like it really it really had me thinking, what's going on with my life? Plus, the beatings and the slappings and all these things. What I think finally woke me up while these things were stirring in me was that the Vatican was sending uh, pontifical commissaries, or another word is uh, papal visits or pontifical visits, not from the Pope, but from delegates. There'd be canon lawyers, psychologists, bishops, nuns, to check, is everything in line not only with canon law, but with human formation? Meaning, are these people getting the care that they need? Are they getting the freedoms, the permissions, the rights that are deserved for religious people? Or is something else going on? And while this was happening, while the Vatican was sending their delegates, one of the leaders, not the founder, but like the second in charge, was saying how this was wrong. And for me, that kind of shook something, because for so long they had told us that we had to be obedient, we
Yeah.
had to humble ourselves. And for me, this was their time for them to be humble and to be open, to be transparent. Because for 11 years, I was transparent. They saw my life, they ruined my life. And here they were, instead of being transparent, they were hiding their crimes. And so that's when I kind of said, uh, I need, I need to get the hell out.
Wow. Yeah. And hearing it from somebody within, from people who have a better understanding, right? Or who they're from the outside looking in, right? It does. I'm sure that really did shake you up a bit, like reflecting on how many years of your life at that point. Yeah, that's insane, but it's a blessing too that that happened and you were able to finally see the truth. That is incredible.
Well, I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave around year 8 or 9, but they didn't let me. They were saying, again, it's that guilt and shame, and so I couldn't leave. I was stuck. And then with me being stuck there, I think the solitary confinement and them accusing me, or like just humiliating me on a regular basis, that crushes a person. And so when I came out and started saying, hey, this happened, that happened, a lot of people weren't supportive. They were saying that I'm just being a bit of I'm just spreading a sob story. But these things are true, and it's hurtful. And it's not, I don't think it's what any religion should be about.
No. And I would not say that is just a straight up cult, con artist,
Yeah.
Taking advantage of people's goodness too. That's what's crazy about it is they're using the good in you to keep you there. And I mean, solitary confinement, that is nuts. Where did they put you? What did that entail?
Well, it's for them, they would say, oh, it's not solitary confinement, it's a blessing. So what happened was, the superior, you can't question a superior. Once a superior says something, the way they describe it is, that's the will of God. So you got to do it by hook or by crook. You're going to do it. Don't complain, because if you complain, that's like you complaining to God. So what happened was, the superior at the time, this was in Delaware. I mean, yeah, we did move around. So at that point of the story, I was in Delaware. He made an announcement that I volunteered to stay in the chapel, in the prayer room, all day for forever. Like, I mean, so what happened was I would stay in the chapel by myself, and it was just I mean, I'm just in the chapel, just by myself, and there's no human interaction. It's like, and I can't leave the chapel. If I leave, it's a sin. It's like I couldn't eat with the community. I couldn't really engage with them. I mean, yes, I would see them, but I couldn't be with them. It's like, so it's not solitary confinement, but it is solitary confinement because I'm confined. Even to go to the bathroom, I have to like ring a bell so that, or like my meals, I have to like ring a bell. Okay, I'm ready to eat. Or yeah, I got to go to the bathroom and get someone release me.
That is wild. So this is some serious hardcore brainwashing they were doing. Like they were breaking people down. I mean, did some people like lose it? That just sounds like so much psychologically.
Well, not everyone went through the things that I did. So
Okay.
some hesitate to call it a cult. And I understand because they didn't go, I mean, some of them, I think there were a good number who went through a peaceful time. It wasn't cray like what I experienced. So I understand that everyone wants to call it a cult. But from my point of view, yeah, it sucked. And I did see others, going back to your question of like anyone that kind of like lost it. Yes, we did have people who psychologically did lose it. And it was, I think, the lack of sleep. Because I'll give you the scenario, like for my condition, my case was me and the other brothers, the older members, our rising time was at 12:45 in the morning. We wake up at 12:45, you wash up, get your coffee, whatever. At 1:30, you have to be in the chapel. To be in the chapel at 1:30, you pray until 8 in the morning. At 8 in the morning, they go get their breakfast, they go do their things. But for me, I'm stuck in the chapel. I have to stay in there from 1:30 in the morning up until 10 p.m. And so that's like 10 p.m., 11. There was only 2 hours and 45 minutes of sleep. So yeah, some people psychologically, I think the lack of sleep and also the paranoia, because they would say the Freemasons are out to get us, the communists, all these weird things. They would bring up this paranoia that people are out to get us, that devils are outside the door. So yeah, there were some people who did kind of break down mentally.
Right. So much paranoia. I imagine that the people who had a more peaceful time were probably not so much instigating or asking questions or breaking rules. Were they more like conforming or going along with things, do you think, that made their time different? Or were they like leaders that had a more peaceful time? Like,
that's a good question. That's a very good question. I think I'll give an example. I was in the Philippines and I received a call from my brother. And he said, "Hey, bro, I want you to come to LA for my wedding." And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "I already spoke to Father Bing, because I don't know if I think I mentioned it earlier that there was my grandmother died and they didn't let me go. And so my brother said, I don't want that shit to happen again where they're lying to us. So I went to the main guy and got permission. So you're going to come to my wedding. We already got your ticket. And this is from Father Bing. So you're good to come. All right. So I go to LA and, they give me a cell phone and I receive messages from one of, not the main guy, but like the second or third in charge, saying, how dare you go back home? How dare you be with family? Another thing they were saying was, no one else gets this luxury. Yet how dare you? You've been a brother for 9 years. At that point, it was like 8-9 years. You've been a brother for this long, and you still don't know that you need to be detached from your family and only attached to God. And right there, because I was always trained to protect them. But right there, I just started like yelling out all these things like, dude, like I see sisters from the community going back to visit their family all the time. I see some brothers going back to visit their family all the time. I couldn't be with my grandma when she died for my brother's wedding. They're giving me a piss show, and they were saying that I have to leave the wedding. I can't be there for the wedding. I stayed for the wedding, but
Absolutely, you
but
did.
I had all this guilt, and what I saw was there were, and I don't blame, there were some, I guess, favorites. They were good people who were just treated well, and I think some members, I think the I think the leadership were nice to them because they knew that if they would be nice, their families would donate large amounts. And my family, yeah, they would give money, maybe not super large amounts, but then my parents were always wondering, why the fuck don't you come here? Why is it always that when they come to LA, we see other brothers, other sisters, but you're never here? And I didn't know. I didn't have an answer to that. But now that I can step back and look, it appears to me that, hey, there was favoritism. And although they were trying to give me that guilt, like, how dare you, Ryan, be with your family? It's really intertwined with bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. That is crazy. Yeah, money, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm so glad that you got away, and I'm sure you went and reunited with your family again, and they were extremely excited to have you out of that.
Well, when I went to LA for the wedding, I was like, when you see like a stray dog and it's like shaking in the corner, I was kind
Yeah,
of like that because, I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to hug them, but also I was afraid that if I leave the community and go back and stay in LA at that point, like, am I going to be a curse to my family? Am I going to be like the damnation? Is there going to be like a thunderbolt that's going to destroy me and my family? So my family was like, why don't you just stay? And I said, I can't because it's a sin. It's bad. So I had to go back to the Philippines. And then when I got back to the Philippines, it was, a scolding, how dare you, Ryan? How could you do such a thing? And I was arguing, well, geez, the founder himself said I can come. And they were like, no, he never said that. So it's like the gaslighting too.
like give you permission, like, yep, and then turn around and say, no, we didn't. Yeah, that sounds toxic.
Oh, yeah.
Toxic environment, that's a cult. I would say you made the right judgment call on that one. It is hard to look at things for what it is when you're a cult member. It can be very challenging to even. I've had other people say even using the word cult was hard for them.
Oh, yeah.
But you call it what it is.
Yeah,
Language is important.
it is important. And it took a while for me to acknowledge it because I think that I was still protecting them. Because by me saying that I was in a cult, it's acknowledging that I was in a place that wasn't what I thought it was supposed to be. And the truth is, it was a cult, at least in my experience. And so when I found the strength to say it's a cult, I removed the blame from myself because it was initially it was I was in a group. It didn't really work out. I was always protecting them.
Yeah.
And then when I would meet with other ex-members and I would start saying, hey, this happened, that happened, these bad things happened, they lied here, they did this, there was fraud. It was, oh, no, Ryan, don't say those things, but I had to really give myself space to heal. And when I say it was a cult, it's not out of anger or hatred, but like you said, language does matter, and it's a truth, and I had to get that.
Right. And I think it's just so normal too when you coming to terms with the fact that you were in a cult, because that is that cognitive dissonance where it's hard for us to imagine we made the wrong choice for this many years of our life, and that the last however many years of my life was not what I thought it was. That's a whole part of your healing in itself, is really coming to terms with, that lost time, and that the big purpose you thought you had, wasn't actually the true intentions of this group you were involved with. And it definitely takes time, but you seem like you're in a really good place, at this point. And if you want to get in a little bit here into what you've done since leaving, I know you have the Truth That Heals podcast. So if you would like to get into that, like, how did you start that podcast? At what point did you say, I want to do this? I want to start talking about this.
Well, to be honest, and it might sound cheesy, but I started this already. I think the seed started in high school, because in high school, I wanted to do something with interviewing people or taking pictures, taking videos. I really wanted to do that. And being in LA, it's like, okay, well, damn, I mean, it's like, this is it. I mean, this is the place to be. But then I left, and then I didn't realize until maybe this past year that it's like, Ryan, the old me, the one that joined, like I stopped growing there, and I forgot all about that previous me. So during this healing, I've been having to remove, like symbolically, I guess, remove all of these like dark energy and rewire my brain and to remember, who is it that I am?
Yeah.
Like, who am I? What is it that I like? And I guess naturally, without even thinking, I would get my camera. I'm currently in San Antonio, but I would go to Austin, take pictures of people. I would interview them. I would do a blog and just interview people. But
Nice.
It wasn't yet the Truth That Heals. And I started a podcast, kind of talking like normal, like for fun, just having a normal podcast. But like after the second episode, I was like, you know what? I don't want to be inauthentic. I want to be real. And I think that in order for me to be real and sincere, and maybe this isn't going to be the type of podcast that's going to get me millions of dollars or thousands of dollars. But I feel that this is the road I need to take. And so I started sharing my story, and then I started forming the name, The Truth That Heals. So initially, it was more of me telling my story, me expressing myself. And then from there, allowing other people to come on the show. At first, it was mostly just cult survivors. But I don't want it to only be about cults. I want to, because going back in high school, I always had the desire.
Right.
So the grand scheme is to interview just whoever. Come on the show. You have a story, or you're a hairstylist. Okay, come on the show. Whatever. I don't care. But I want to hear what is your truth that heals, because there's bullshit. There are lies in any industry, any background. Like, you can't do it. There's imposter syndrome. There's the bullshit there. But what is the truth? And I want to hear people's truth, people's wisdom, so that they can have also a safe space and say what it is. And that's what brings me joy. That's what lights me up, and it's brought me some purpose.
Absolutely. And I agree. That's a really good idea to kind of touch on varying perspectives of the truth that heals for different people from different realms of existence, right? So there's so many different, the cult dynamic and like that kind of psychology really is something that you see everywhere. So it's not, I don't look at it all like a specific to cult thing. I think it's something that happens in families, relationships like with friends or romantic partners. It's something that can happen in the workplace. So it's cool to kind of expand and ask, different people from different backgrounds and having those different perspectives. So that is, yeah, and that's really cool. So it's also awesome that you were able to reflect back at what am I passionate about? That pre-cult, like who you really are within yourself. And you were able to go back and really reflect and know that this is what you love to do. And that's a hard part of the journey too, because it can feel like that part of you died at some point, the old you before cult. Like it can feel that way, but you're still, you still have all those traits, and all the things you enjoy doing are still there. And I think when you're not exposing yourself to those different things, you don't realize that you forget what you were good at, or you forget what you're capable of, because for so long you weren't doing the things that you're good at. You're like not allowed to use your strengths in a cult like that.
It's so true what you said about you're not allowed to use your strength. And I think that in my experience, and maybe in countless other people have similar experience, where they're in an environment for so long, people pleasing, because I have to please the superior. But then they would also kind of, it was like a mantra that they would have us repeat. I'm good for nothing. I'm worth nothing. Only God is good.
Wow.
It's a lot longer, but yeah, when you repeat that so long, it's bullshit, but it becomes a truth to a person. And you think
Exactly.
there's no good in me, or like it has like the idea that if God exists, He created me evil, so everything I do is absolutely evil. But then when I left and was able to heal and see myself again, see who I am, authentically, my genuine self, it's like, okay, I am beautiful. There are gifts that I have. There are talents that I have that I feel that even though they've been locked away, I feel that perhaps God does exist and He created me out of love. Then these talents or these gifts, they're dormant, but hey, let's wake its ass up and let's get to work. And here I am on your show now. So see how the journey continues.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, that's amazing. It's nice to see too, because when you first get out of a cult, it's so hard, right? And there's so many people who go to social media after leaving a cult looking for community and just kind of or they're going through their healing of telling their story and seeking community and people who understand. And it can be such a hard time. And it's good for those people to see, people like you who you've been there and you got to the other side of that. That is an inspiration. It's a very, very challenging road at first, the road back to yourself. So you have started a new project too. So let's get into that project. Creativity Worth Expressing.
Yes, so I do have the podcast Truth That Heals, but although I love it, it's long form interviews on the most part. But I felt that I needed something because yes, when I started the podcast, The Truth That Heals, I said to myself, I need to be genuine with my audience and kind of relate to them through something like, trauma and challenges. So yes, The Truth That Heals is like that side of me, but then I needed like the creative side, the outgoing, the Ryan Anthony side of me to really come out. And that is through creativity. I kind of see myself as like Bruce Wayne and Batman. So I don't know which one is Bruce Wayne and which one is Batman, but it's like one is The Truth That Heals, and then on the other side, on the totally different spectrum, it's all about creativity and laughter, and I have comedians. And so anyways, the idea of creativity worth expressing, it's not on podcast platforms. I was thinking about doing it like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, but it's just too much time. It's just too much for one guy. So it's just on YouTube. Also on, I have parts of it like on Instagram, TikTok. But the idea is get artists. I don't care what kind of art they make. It can be quilting, it can be drawing, but I want to bring artists and have them share what is their work. How did they evolve? And why is creativity worth making at all? Why is it something beautiful because I believe there is a world of ideas, there's a world of creativity, a realm. But how the hell am I going to access that realm? Because from a cult, you are living in a black and white environment. Your vision is right and wrong. Like example, trying to color a coloring book. Oh man, I got to color the coloring book. How would the leader want me to make it? Fuck the leader. Make it yourself. Be creative. Create. But I want to invite people to share why is it worth, or how can one access this world or realm of creativity, and how do you bring it onto the canvas, or whether it's music, how are you able to release it? So that's something that I've just started. I'm still looking for guests. I have a few guests. I'm always looking. So, hey, just a shout out. If someone wants to be a guest.
That's a really good idea too. Creativity worth expressing. I like that because there's so many different kinds of art. It's amazing. And I do believe that human beings, a part of our nature is to create, like look at your technology sitting in front of you or your home and, like we create. That's what we do. And it is suppressed in different groups and cults and things. Absolutely, your creativity can be suppressed. And it's a whole different way of being as well. I think that it's a great therapy to dive into creativity and whatever your art is. There's so many different kinds. Like you said, you had a comedian, right? Like that's also an art right there. Like comedy is actually requires a lot of creativity. And
I couldn't do it.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Being a comedian, that would be a tough gig. You really have to be that kind of person that funny guy, who doesn't care, about hecklers in the audience and things like that. I'd
probably cry or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I would be able to do it. Well, there's been times where I'm like, maybe I could be a comedian, and then like, probably not. So it's a good thing to put out there too. Working in the realm of cult advocacy and cult recovery and doing those kinds of podcasts or that kind of content is very heavy, and it can kind of keep you in that mindset, right? Where you're just, the cult is like front and center in your life, in your content, and doing different kinds of projects like creativity worth expressing. You can actually, that's true authenticity right there. That's you being able to be who you really are and doing something that you love that has absolutely nothing to do with cults.
And it's great talking about cults, and I say it's great because I think people need to be informed. I think the more we talk about it, even in religious groups, I encourage people to talk about cults. What are their tactics? Because if you know the tactics, if you know what it is that they do, then you can stop it. You can prevent it. Or if you see it happening, you can call out to that pastor, "Hey, dude, I see what you're doing. That's cult activity." But at the same time, when I'm doing this all the time, it's like watching true crime, or listening to true crime all the time. At least for me, it can be very informative. But at the same time, I'll see how is my mood for the rest of the day. It's like it's kind of low, and so I needed this because I think that in my life I needed the balance, and it brings joy. Both of them bring joy, and I just love the idea that we don't have to be repressing our creativity or our talents or our gifts. It's okay to express them and let it in a healthy and positive environment.
And it is important to spread that awareness, because that is how people are going to be able to differentiate between, is this church I walked into a religious church, or is it a cult? And it is also important as a cult survivor for your own mind to have something else. And I truly believe that too. You do need, other things on your mind and other things that get you excited, so that you don't just spend your life like in that cult mindset all the time, or always, like you said, the way you feel when you watch true crime. I remember when I was going through trying to understand cult psychology, cult dynamics, I was watching so many documentaries and I got sucked in. I watched so many and I loved it, but it's also actually kind of triggering as well.
Yeah.
You're like, have this weird, like, I get this really rich understanding, but then I also have to go through my own memories and the way that I can relate to these documentaries, which every single one I can relate to. There's always similarities between every single group. So yeah, it is good to tap into those other strengths as well and show the world that, yeah, you can just move forward with your life and do what you love. And, eventually it might not even be about cults at all. It might just be whatever else you love. But I think also speaking out and advocacy seems like a necessary step in your healing.
Yes, it's necessary because I couldn't leave that part of my life kind of like unresolved or unhealed. And I think that being an advocate for cult survivors, I think that, although I'm not as forceful in the way I speak about it anymore, but I think just me having that time to really be really strong on it, it was necessary for my healing. And, the podcasts are still up, the episodes are still up, and I still do have people contacting me from either my group or similar groups saying thank you. So it always is, it brings so much, I would say, healing from all that past trauma. And, just having someone say thank you, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. So they were watching your podcast.
Or sometimes they heard me on someone else's podcast. Like maybe after this episode, someone might contact me and be, hey, I heard you on Ari's podcast. Like, wow, it's just also connections. People are always seeking connections. And like you mentioned earlier, when someone leaves a cult, like they go on social media, they're seeking connections and they're also seeking answers. And so I tried my best to share my life, share what I experienced, and hopefully by me sharing what I went through, maybe they'll find some of the answers that they're.
Right, exactly. And actually going online for myself, because I never was really into social media and always had like kind of a negative perspective of social media until I went into the cult advocacy space, which was actually quite recent, right? So once I was in that space and I realized the good that can be done here, right? And I think it's really cool, especially for those who have left a group where they've been shunned by their families and friends and don't have anyone. I see like a lot of value in going online and building a community online as you go through that healing when it's lonely when you've been shunned and you don't know anyone. And I think that is beautiful. I see that all the time. I see a lot of like Jehovah's Witnesses coming on and finding community after losing their family or friends, because they left the church. And so I do see a lot of value in just opening up online and reaching out because you're not alone. And there's so many people who have been through what you've been through that can relate to you and will show you that support and everything. So
no, you really hit on something that I think we haven't really spoken about much in this episode, is on shunning. And that's something that I really learned because I was shunned by the cult. And, of course, they're going to shun the hell out of you. They're going to make you feel like shit. They're going to make you feel like you're worth nothing. But when I came home, my family, who wasn't in the cult, they had no idea of what was going on. So they came and they welcomed me with love and with kindness. And although sometimes they'd be pissed, and I come from a Latino family, that they'd be like, "What the hell's going on? Like, why don't you want to give me a hug? Or like, why are you so quiet? Like, what's going on?" But still, even though they have their ways, it was still a warm, welcoming coming home. And something that I learned from getting involved in, watching documentaries on cults and watching movies and listening to podcasts is, yes, some people, their families are in the cult.
mm-hmm.
They've been shunned. And sadly, I've heard cases where people take their life because there's no one to talk to.
Yeah.
There's no one to connect to. So I really applaud you for what you're doing, because you're really making a safe space for people like me to come on the show and where people can find your podcast, your episodes, your story, and hopefully it will give them a bit of purpose and knowing that they're not alone.
I appreciate that. And it's true. It's so important to have that space for people open up. I think telling your story is one of the most healing things that you can do. When you're ready, of course. I don't think you should do it if you're not ready for it. For me, it was really hard. It was like the first time I told my story, I was so nervous, anxious, and afraid for no reason. I had like this weird fear. I was afraid of judgment, like of other people judging me or people finding out who I know who in my life today who don't know this about me. Like I had all this fear of telling my story. But after telling my story, like that fear went away. So is there anything else that you want to say to the audience?
Something that I want to say is sometimes it's hard to have hope. Sometimes hope feels like, or it even sounds like bullshit, because so many dark moments and so much that you have been through, especially you've been in a cult. So maybe hope might not be the right word for you, but whatever word it is that is positive, if you can find something positive to just hold on to, and even if the smallest thing, maybe hold on to that and allow it to grow. Because for me, I was in the darkest place. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to see anybody. I think the only positivity that I had was the kindness of my family. I know not everyone has that. But if you listening to this podcast, if this brings some sort of positivity for you to get up in the morning and live life, that's what I want people to take away from this. Is it's okay to live your life, find out who you are, because the cult strips you away so much. Find out who you are and love yourself.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your projects and what you're doing. Really quick, if you want to tell the audience where they can find your podcast, Truth That Heals Pod.
Yeah, the Truth That Heals podcast, it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I'm also on YouTube. So please subscribe. That helps me out. And also subscribe to my other YouTube channel, Creativity Worth Expressing. That'll help me out a million.
Very beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on. We're out of time. Thank you all for watching Disillusion Podcast, and we will see you next time.